Hey everybody, Tim again here, TP Pipes, back in the shop. I don't know if any of you noticed it the other day or not, but I posted a video of this new series of videos I was going to do on pipe making with bare minimum tools, and I didn't notice until after I'd got the video uploaded to YouTube that about, I don't know, a fourth of the way through, the audio and the video got out of sync with each other. So if you noticed that I had one up and then it was gone, that's why I deleted it. Sorry about that, but going to try to redo that today, and hope everybody's doing good. Several people have been asking me about doing a video tutorial to show how to make pipes with, if you don't have any machinery, if all you've got is basic tools or no tools at all, and you'd like to get a few tools to be able to make a pipe with. So that's the perspective that I'm going to approach this from, and I realize this will be boring for some of you that are already experienced with tools and familiar with them, but we as craftsmen sometimes forget that not everybody is as familiar with tools as we are. So those of you that are already familiar, just overlook me as I explain this to those that are not. The first tip or the first advice that I'd like to give to anybody thinking about making pipes, wanting to get into it, is to save yourself a lot of headache and get pre-drilled blocks of briar. This right here, I just dropped a stem. This is a block of briar, like most pipe makers get it. And this is not a pre-drilled kit. You can see it has no holes in it, no mortise, no airway, no chamber hole. And the hardest part about making a pipe that will smoke good for you is getting those holes drilled correctly. And if you don't have the proper machinery to do it with, a lathe or a good drill press, it's hard to do. It's hard to get those holes drilled like they need to be. So the best advice that I can give anybody that's just wanting to start out, and that's how I started out, and a lot of other makers that I know, that's how they started out too, is by buying pre-drilled blocks of briar. Already has the chamber, the mortise, the draft hole, already has all that drilled for you. So all that you have to do is shape it. Also with the pre-drilled kits, they come with a stem already in the block for you. And this is a preformed stem here. Try to get that focus. And if you'll notice, the tenon on this preformed stem is quite big. That's probably, I don't know, probably 3/8 of an inch. And if you don't get a pre-drilled kit, you'll have to have a way of turning this tenon down to a size that will match the mortise hole that you've drilled and fit in there perfectly. And not that you can't do it, but that's not an easy thing to do without a lathe. So if you get the pre-drilled kit, you got your block already drilled, it's already got a stem with the tenon turned to the right size to go in the mortise. So you're way ahead of the ball game to start with a pre-drilled. Excuse me. A couple of things that you'll need, though, to shape that block of briar. The number one thing is files, and there's all kinds of files that you can get. And Rick Black laughed at me the other night. He had seen my video before I deleted it, but got a whole bucket a whole bucket full of files. Of course, I do a lot of things besides pipes. I do some metal work too, and been collecting files for years, so you can't have enough files. Let's talk for just a minute about some kinds of files. And with any given tool, just about it, people refer to them, call them the same tool by different names. So what I call these files may not be the same thing you've heard it called, but hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about. This particular file has two different sides to it. The first side only has one set of grooves or lines cut in it. If I can get turned the right way, all the grooves are running in the, there we go. All the grooves are running in the same direction. This type of file is called a finishing file, or a smooth file, or a single cut file. And that's your smoothest. It's the one that will cut the least fast, remove less material, but leave the best finish. So the single cut leaves the smoothest finish and removes the least amount of material. The next one, and this file just happens to have two types of cut on the same file. And I really like this file. This is a Nicholson file, and it's already got the shaped handle on it, so you don't have to worry about putting a wooden handle on it. A typical file, and it's just a little bitty one here. The typical file just comes with that little sharp tang on it, and that's rough on a hand. We usually put a piece of wood dowel, or you can use a golf ball or something on it. But anyway, back on the subject. The second side of this file is what's called a double cut. Don't know how well that's showing up, but it's called a double cut file. Hopefully you can see in the video. It's cut, the lines are cut in this direction, and then also in this direction too. And what that does, it makes this cut a little more aggressive. The teeth are more aggressive. It removes the material faster, but it also leaves a rougher finish on the wood. So this is the second type, and again, it's called either a double cut or a bastard cut. Yeah, just like it sounds, bastard. I don't know why it's called that. Some of you that are like looking stuff up on Google, you can look up the bastard file and let me know why it's called that if you want to. But that's the medium aggressiveness, I guess you could say. The third type is called a rasp. And hopefully you can see on this one here, that's a lot different look than this one. You can see that the teeth on this are a lot bigger, rough. You know, when you put your finger on that and to go to slide it across, it just grabs your finger. A rasp, a wood rasp, removes wood very quickly, but it also leaves a very rough surface. So typically, depending on how much wood you're trying to remove, what most people do is step down. They'll start with a rasp to do the general shaping, then they'll move down to the bastard or crosscut file to smooth out some of the grooves and cuts left by the rasp. And then finally, before sanding, they'll move down to the single cut file, or finishing file, smooth file, before sanding, to get the wood as smooth as it can be before you have to start sanding. And trust me, there's lots and lots and lots of sanding, hand sanding to do, and pipe making, especially if you don't have The tools to be like a lathe to be able to do it with, and to be able to do your sanding while it's on the lathe. Files come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and you kind of want an assortment of files to be able to do different jobs. Me and Rick Kopp were Skyping the other night, and he got tickled about my rat tail file. Rick, I just want you to know, buddy, that I found my rat tail. This is another type of file that's very handy. It's a round file, but if you'll notice, it's bigger on this end than it is out here toward the tip. And that's why they call it a rat tail file, I guess, because it resembles a rat's tail. But this is very good for, grab a pipe. These types of files are good for when you start working your bowl to shank transition, trying to get that area in there sanded down so that you have a smooth transition between the bowl and the shank. But you don't have to use a rat tail file. You can use a chainsaw file or any kind of round file. And typically the rat tail files are basically a bastard cut. They're pretty aggressive cutting. The next thing that you would need is sandpaper. Lots and lots of sandpaper. In grits ranging from as coarse as 120 grit. And usually I try to kind of double when I change from one grit to the next. I usually try to double the grit. In other words, if I start with 120, the next one I would use would be 240. Then I would jump up to 320, 400, 600, 800. Not necessarily doubling each time, but you don't need to jump, say, from 120 to 400 grit. You need lots of different grits of sandpaper so that you can gradually work your way up to be able to work that wood down smooth. But you'll need sandpaper all the way up to 1500 or 2000 grit, especially doing it by hand, doing the sanding by hand, and you'll spend lots of time sanding. The third thing that you'll need is some type of handsaw. And I know all the regular pipe makers out there are cringing right now. Handsaw, you're crazy. I hadn't used a handsaw in 20 years. But remember, we're talking to the guys that are just now starting to make a pipe and don't have any tools at all. So you've got to have some way of cutting some of that excess wood off. This is a little file, a little saw here that I like. It's an Irwin brand, people that make vice grips. And it is a reverse cut saw. So and I'm not going to turn the teeth down to my finger and cut my finger like an idiot. I'm going to turn it backside. But with a typical saw, it cuts when you push the saw forward, like that right there. With this one, it cuts in reverse. It cuts when you're pulling it back. So for a handsaw, I really like this one. It's thin. It'll flex where you can get up close to the bowl when you're trimming off that excess wood. And the teeth on this one, even though they're not real aggressive, it cuts real well. So I would highly recommend that little saw. It's small, easy to hold on to, easy to use. Any type of handsaw will work. Anything that you can get and find that's not too expensive. If you need to, you can even use a hacksaw. These are typically for cutting metal, but a hacksaw with a slightly coarser blade in it. They make the blades in different teeth per inch, and they're not expensive, and you can use a hacksaw for trimming off your excess wood. The fourth thing that you would need, and I don't have one out here that I can bring up to the camera and show you. I'll try to turn the camera around toward my bench over here. But it's almost impossible to get by in pipe making without having some way of holding the pipe besides in your hand. If you've got a vise, you can clamp a wooden dowel the size of your chamber. You can clamp it in the vise and then put the pipe over the top of the wooden dowel. And as you're filing and sanding, you can rotate the pipe on that wooden dowel. But that holds the pipe so that you don't have to hold that pipe by hand like this to try to do your filing or sanding or staining. So a vise is definitely essential. This is about a 4 or 6 inch vise, and it bolts to the bench, but you can get smaller ones that'll work just fine that have a clamp on them that you can actually clamp even to the edge of your table or your desk or whatnot. So you don't need a real big vise, but you do need some way of holding the pipe while you're working on it. And again, up close, there's the pipe over the wooden dowel, and with the wooden dowel held in the vise, then you don't have to try to hold the pipe by hand like this when you're working on it. Okay, hopefully I got all of that edited out where I was moving the camera around to try to show you the vise. But those are the 4 things that I think, and of course, I'm not trying to by any means say that my way is the best way or the only way. It's just my way. The way that I do it, or the way that I would recommend that you go about trying to do it. But it's always good to talk to other pipe makers and see how they do it and get advice from them. And most pipe makers in the community are pretty good about sharing information, and most of us communicate with each other and share tips and whatnot and try to help each other out. So I'm sure if you talk to some of the others, they'd be glad to give you some tips too. But we'll recap real quick. Start with a pre-drilled block of briar. Save yourself a whole lot of headache if you don't have a lathe or a drill press. In part 2 of the series here that I'll do, we'll cover, if you choose not to start with a pre-drilled block, we'll talk about what you can do, how you can drill it if you don't get the pre-drilled block. But to get a pre-drilled block, you need plenty of files, smooth cut or single cut, double cut or bastard cut files, and wood rasps. At least those 3 types of files, and a round file or a rat tail file that's pretty small in diameter. A small saw, hand saw for cutting off excess wood, and then the vise that I showed you just a few minutes ago for holding the pipe while you're working on it. All right, I hope everybody enjoyed the video, and I'll get started with part 2 and try to get that posted. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post that below the video, and I'll try to answer any questions that you might have. And if I've forgotten something that you other pipe makers think I should have included in it, and of course, again, we all have different ways of doing things, but if I've forgotten something, feel free to jump in and comment on that. But if you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, give me a like. If you haven't already subscribed, subscribe so that I'll know people are enjoying the videos, and encourage me to make more of them to help people out. Again, thanks for watching, everybody, and I hope everybody has a great day.